Regardless of her mental and emotional state or the environment you are in, you can always take a woman through her mind and her imagination into a place of seduction. I'm Paul, apexmindset.net to book a consultation. Like the video, share it, watch it till the end, subscribe if you're not subscribed. Let's get into the topic, which is we're going to talk about seduction, and I'm going to share with you. We can call it a seduction pyramid. I'm really bad at coming up with names for the models of things that I come up with. So maybe you guys in the comments can come up with a cool name for my little pyramid I'm going to share with you here. All right. But what I wanted to show you is this. I wanted to illustrate to you kind of where you stand and the foundations that you're dealing with and where you have when in terms of seduction. When you first meet a chick or you run into even if you've known her for a while, you run into a girl that you are interested in seducing, or if you just meet a woman that you're interested in seducing, or if you catch her on a date, even maybe you've matched on a dating app and now you're out meeting for the first time. It's a good idea to have an understanding of this model or this seduction pyramid I'm going to present to you. So you can have your goal in mind of where you're trying to take this interaction if you are in fact trying to seduce her and inspire her desires. So her environment is kind of the first factor you want to look at. Women are very motivated socially and by what the social circles and people around them think about her. All right, women are instinctually wired to respond to the social environment more so even than most men. It's an instinctual thing. Okay. And so this is why women will go to the bathroom together, for example, right? And guys don't necessarily do that. Women are usually better at maneuvering around socially, and they're usually more aware than most men on a whole with the environment they're in and more socially calibrated to that environment. So like if you come up to a girl and you're at a work function and you treat it and you're trying you want to seduce this girl and you treat it like, let's say it's a bar or a nightclub or whatever, that might not go over well depending on how conservative that work environment is. Let's assume you're not at a social gathering. Let's assume you're sitting next to a girl in a conference meeting or your weekly sales meeting or something, right? You want to seduce her, but the environment is a sales meeting. That's a lot different than meeting her in a coffee house or meeting her at a club or a bar, right? And so if you approach it like it's a club or a bar, you might embarrass yourself, embarrass her, and ruin all of your chances for any sort of seduction. The reason why, of course, is because it's socially not calibrated to the situation and to the environment. So another example of environment, she might be different if she's with her friends to include other male friends versus if she's alone or by herself. If she has an audience and she's a little self-conscious, that might be a little bit different than if there's no audience at all. Part of the environment, and now we're getting into also the second part here, which is her state of mind. Her state of mind is often affected by the environment she's in. A woman who's out on a girls' night, going out to a local bar where girls get hit on all the time, during her ovulation cycle, when she's ovulating, she's going to be in a different mind state of horny and probably sending choosing signals versus that same girl in a different environment, let's say at church with her parents or at a funeral. Now, that doesn't mean you can't seduce a girl in those other environments. There's no one environment that is more seductive than another environment necessarily. I mean, I guess you could argue that there probably are environments that are a little bit more seductive than other ones, but it doesn't matter. That's not even the point. The point is that the environment is important to recognize and be calibrated to, but it doesn't mean that you can't approach a woman in certain environments or contexts. You can approach a woman really in any environment if you follow this pyramid and what I'm going to tell you here. Okay. Now we'll get to all of that in soon. All right. Now her state of mind, though, that's important as well. So whether or not you get blown out or not, and those guys out there who do a lot of approaches, who've been on a lot of dates and have had sex with lots of women, they understand this, that her reasons for saying yes or no basically has more to do with her based on her state of mind and her environment that she's in versus you and your sexual market value. Okay. So let me give a great example. Let's say a high status male comes up to a girl and she's with her boyfriend and some mutual friends. Let's say it's a NBA player, okay, who runs into a girl at a local bar or tavern, and she's out with her boyfriend and she's got her friends around too. And let's say that NBA player is totally not socially calibrated, right? Let's say he's kind of creepy and pervy in the way he acts, and he's just like whatever, and he's just like, hey, whatever, you should come over to my, he's throwing status signals out, you know who I am, you should come to my party and all this stuff. Okay, now, despite all the crap on the internet when they put, I mean, no offense to my friends over there at Fresh and Fit, but, a lot of the girls they get on there, okay, are status and clout chasers, right? That's what they do. So if this dude's girlfriend is an OnlyFans status or clout chaser, then it might be socially acceptable for her to just oogle over this NBA player and leave her boyfriend right there standing in the bar, and her friends might support that even, right? But that's a whole different scenario. That's not actually how most women, even very hot 8, 9s, and 10s operate, okay? That's how clout chasers operate. But using her that as an example, all right? Let's say it's not going to be socially acceptable with her friends groups, and let's say this guy's not acting very calibrated, which happens all the time, by the way, with high status people, because they're so used to people fawning all over them because of their status, they often lose that social calibration. It can happen. And so he might be having an off day or whatever. He's not socially calibrated. The environment that they're in, and let's say her state of mind too, right? And her being embarrassed kind of, and him not being that calibrated to the environment, coming off like a jerk, she might reject him, right? She might be like, no, thanks, but I don't need to go to a party tonight or whatever. Well, here, just maybe I'll, send me a message on my Instagram or whatever she might say, like, to get him away. And I got a boyfriend. Can my boyfriend come? And, she might do all that stuff because she wants to be a good chimpanzee, right? A good girl. And the environment she's in with all of her friends there in this little bar, she would be embarrassed if she were to just run off with this NBA player or whatever, who is acting kind of like a jerk and maybe like not like he's going to see her as valuable, right? So if her values, her state of mind, and her personal values are not chasing clout primarily, all right, she's probably going to reject that NBA player. Now, I mean, some of you guys don't understand crap and sit on the internet all day might want to object to this, but I'll tell you, I've been out and I've seen it too, where celebrities of different levels and athletes have been blown out by girls because they weren't calibrated. Okay. It happens. All right. And so her state of mind, her environment, she ends up blowing this dude out. Her impressions of this guy too, where we're like, wow, he's coming across kind of like a jerk and kind of thirsty and kind of weak in a way because he's just throwing around his status, and uncalibrated. And it turns her off. So her impressions, her state of mind, the environment, it's not conducive of her wanting to go sleep with this guy, right? So she rejects him. Now let's take that same girl. That same girl gets hit up by a blue check mark NBA player. Let's say the same NBA player, different scenario. That didn't happen. Okay. Let's say, the bar thing didn't happen. He sees her on Instagram, sees that she's hot. He hits her up in the DMs. So the environment she's in now, she gets to choose whatever environment she wants to be in and whatever state of mind she wants to be in when she decides to address the DM. So that's one thing. He's high status. He's a decent looking guy. He's an athlete. He's got money. His impression doesn't come across as socially uncalibrated or beta or maybe sending danger signals because, they're not in that social environment that I described before. He's just in the DMs and being calibrated enough or having enough of a conversation where status can carry him through. She has a boyfriend. She has friends that would look down on her if she were to go meet up with this NBA player. But those friends aren't there and her boyfriend doesn't know. So her environment, her state, and her impressions are different. The guy's status is there. And so she sees him as high SMV. So what ends up happening? She makes the choice to go meet up with him and spend the night, right? And so that's a hypothetical scenario to illustrate what I'm saying, how important this environment and her state and her impressions too of what's going on, how those are foundational to her decision making. All right. If a guy is high enough status, he can pull just about any girl. But why he gets blown out is because he's not calibrated to the environment or her emotional or mental state, or the impression he leaves her isn't a good one. That would be why he would get blown out, and his status isn't enough to recover from that. Okay. Consequently, if you guy listening who's maybe average status or even low status, maybe, if you're calibrated to your environment, you're calibrated to her state of mind, and you leave a positive impression as a good genetic option for mating, she is selecting you to sleep with, or she just turned down, she might have turned down $1 million high status guy if he didn't leave those impressions, right? And so that's just something to think about. It's really important to understand the impact, the environment, and her emotional and mental state and her impressions of you have on the interaction and whether or not you're going to be able to seduce her. If her impressions and her state of mind are not conducive of seduction, it won't work. If you're not able to calibrate your seductive efforts to the environment so that she doesn't look or feel out of place in that environment or come across as socially unacceptable, you're probably not going to be successful. All right. But you can't, as long as you're aware of their impressions, and that includes her bad ones. So for example, a lot of women would look at me and see my physique, all right, having more muscles, being more built as a negative. All right. Even though their instinctual brain might be attracted to it, the other part of them is going to say, the assumption is, I must be stupid. I must be an idiot. I spend all my time at the gym. I'm probably a jerk, right? There's all these impressions and stereotypes people will have of me as being a built guy. And so I have to be aware of those impressions and know how to mitigate that in those initial encounters and conversations, because she might be attracted to me, but there's a part of her that is going to be unattracted or not, because her unconscious triggers, if you go back to that dual conversation, unconscious conversation that's happening from a previous video I just did, some of her unconscious triggers are going to be to not want to be with me, right? And so I might have to overcome those impressions. Each one of you guys listening have impressions you're going to give a woman. Some of those impressions are going to be positive and favorable for you being a good genetic option for mating, and some of those are going to be negative or not so good, right? And so you need to be aware of what those are, and you need to be able to know how to mitigate for those throughout the interaction with her. Some of that is just by not behaving or acting in the stereotype that she would expect. That's usually about as simple as it is. If I don't act like a dumb gym guy, for example, and I'm calibrated when I talk to her and seductive, I make her laugh, we have a good time, she usually can step out of those initial impressions pretty quickly of me. But they're saying similar things. Like, let's say, and this is, race is a factor. So I'm going to mention race here. I know it's controversial, but it shouldn't be. I've had clients who have been, Muslim, Arabic, or Indian, right, who are in the West, and they want to be calibrated to meeting women, which are mostly white Western women. Well, white Western women have negative impressions of Indian men, for example. Okay. They consider them a lot of times not good sexual options. But if that Indian man can overcome those impressions by the way he dresses, the way he presents, and his tone of voice and how he talks, he doesn't come across like the typical uncalibrated guy who just got off the boat from India, right? He can oftentimes send those attraction signals pretty hard and get her into a seductive state through next part of the ladder here, next part of the pyramid, through his body language, tonality, and his words. All right. So his words, tonality, and body language can help him overcome these impressions. His words, tonality, and body language can help change her state by being aware of her state. So let's say she's in a great mood. That's an easy one. You don't need to be in the same state as her, by the way. That's not how. You don't need to be in this to match her state completely in order to lead her state into seduction. That's some people think that's the case. NLP usually teaches that. That's actually not true, but you do need to complement her state. So great example, if she's in a really bad mood and you can tell her state of mind is she's just not in a good mood, but then you're able to make a couple of sarcastic comments or jokes, and she laughs. So humor and sarcasm and dark humor is complementary to bad mood, okay? And so you don't want to show up and be in a bad mood while she's in a bad mood and match that way to try to lead her into seduction. I mean, you could, but that's pretty rare that's going to work out well. But you want to come up with a complementary state. So for example, she's in a bad mood and I try to come at her with a state of being super positive, good mood guy and whatever. That might not go so well, right? Or that might not, that's our states aren't matching well enough. And she might be annoyed by my positive state of mind when she's in a negative state or a bad state of mind. She's annoyed. Let's say her overall state is just annoyance, right? Maybe she's been hit on by a couple losers. Maybe her friends aren't acting the way she wants them to act, and she's not in a great mental state. She's annoyed, and then I come at her with excessive happiness or come on her hard with hard seduction stuff like, hey, you look cute, this and that. She might be in a state of mind where she ain't having that shit, right? But if I come up to her, if I recognize just through her body language what her state of mind is, and then I compliment that, let's say in this example, she's annoyed, and I use a little dark humor, right? Maybe I make an observational comment about somebody, so I'm doing humor at someone else's expense in that case, or I make some, dark, comment or whatever, but it's kind of funny. That can pull her out of that annoyed state, get her into laughing a little bit. And now she's now laughing and there's a bit of a humorous state now that she's getting into that I've now led her into. So now I can lead the rest of the interaction into a decent conversation and even into seduction and into the bedroom. Okay. But this leading happens through your body language, your tonality, and the word selection. But your body language and tonality and words are only going to be so effective if you can recognize the impressions she has. You can recognize her state of mind and her state of being. Okay. And calibrate all of those things to the environment you're in. Because if you can't do that, what happens is, this is what a lot of you guys do when you're trying to learn pickup, is you're just learning and LARPing, essentially, live action role playing with seduction. You're just using words and a tone and a body language, but mainly the words. You think of a good hook or pickup line or whatever, and then you're trying to ask her the questions and this and that and the other. You're focused on your damn techniques and not focused on making a connection in a human way with this other human being, all right? And that's why you guys lose and get rejected a lot. So if you are calibrated to her and understand what's her impressions, climb into her brain a little bit, figure out what is her impressions of me? What's her impressions of the place that we're in right now? What's her impressions of the social environment? What's her thoughts, beliefs, values? What's her state of mind right now? Is she relaxed? Is she calm? Is she nervous? Is she anxious? Is she unhappy? Is she happy? Is she feeling kind of like in a savage sexual mood and you can just tell, or she's completely bored and aloof? What's her state, right? Being able to understand that and then complement it, not necessarily match it, but complement it so that you make that connection with her, and then you can lead her into a different state. And then, of course, the environment you're in, calibrating it to where you're at so you don't come across as a weirdo hitting on a girl when she's, let's say, she's ringing people up in a checkout line and you start picking her up when you got a line full of people and she's like totally not focused on what you're saying. For example, wrong environment. You see what I'm saying? And so these are things that you need to be aware of, more or less, and you need to calibrate yourself to these things. And so I just wanted to share with you this little pyramid here, because your words, body language, and tonality will take her out of the environment mentally. So let's say she's at a bar or something with her friends, and you're seducing her, you complement her state, you move her into a good, pleasant conversation, and now it's turning seductive. Her impressions of you were a mix of good and bad, but now they're more good than bad because of the direction of the conversation and where you're taking it. Your tonality and body language is having this seductive interaction with her covertly, whereas your words are calibrated to the environment that you're in. She forgets where she is my point. She forgets that she came in there and she was kind of in a bad mood, or maybe she was in a good mood, but like she was more thinking about hanging out with her girlfriends and not talking to guys, or whatever her state of mind was earlier. She forgets what that state is because she's now wrapped up into your frame, right? So your frame is the number one here. So she's wrapped up into your frame. So she forgets her old state of mind. She loses context of the environment she's in, at least a little bit anyway. And she's now in a bubble of you and her. And that's where seduction is going to happen. This is where now you can take her through this journey through her mind into desiring you and being seduced by you. This is where she's in your frame. Congruence up here, that's a whole nother discussion. That's usually after a few interactions and some sex. That's where she becomes dependent on your emotional and mental state. That's a whole nother thing, usually for an LTR material thing. But you guys just need to worry about pulling her into your frame using your words, your tones, and your body language by calibrating and understanding yourself and where you stand in the environment, recognizing, understanding her state and her impressions overall and of you, and you make that connection with her as a human being, as a sexual being, and you move her into your frame, and that's where the seduction happens. So that is that ladder. Now, I know it's very conceptual, not a lot of technique there, but I want you to take all these techniques you've been learning and apply it to that and to understand that. Because a lot of you guys are just like, oh, what do I say? Then you focus on the technique and you're not including that human element. Listen, you want to take your game to the next level where you can connect with women on a deep level very quickly and signal seduction and desire very quickly and very on a deep level too, like not just on a surface level, where she wants to be with you and she wants to come back for more. You need to do more than just LARP the techniques and the words and the topics and how do I close. It's not that mechanics aren't important, because they are, but you need to learn how to be aware, okay? Socially aware. And that's what that pyramid represents. That little, we could call it seduction ladder, seduction pyramid. I don't know what you want to call it. Suggestions welcome in the comments. But that's what that is there to illustrate. So you guys know what to do. Hopefully that was helpful. So take the techniques you've already been learning and apply it to this new understanding that I've illustrated, and start making real human-to-human connections with the women that you're talking to. I think that you're going to find that you're going to get a lot more and better results when you approach it in this manner.